What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. And before I introduce Jen Groover, who you guys are going to love, she is fascinating. Her career is just ridiculous and what she's doing, and now she's taken her brand to freaking rocket science heights. Man, it's amazing. But before we talk to her, I'm going to tell everybody where they can hear the podcast. I'm pretty much everywhere: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, wherever you listen to podcasts. That's where you can find Two Dates and a Dash. All they ask is that you hit the subscribe button and the automatic download. That's key because then you don't have to worry about it. It'll just automatically get into your queue, and it helps me with my metrics, which is really important too for me. If you want to learn more about me, Matt Cubbler, you can go to mattcubbler.com. You can get a copy of my book, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, which was written 14 years ago and still going strong. It's a story about my life growing up with my brother Andy, who was autistic and had a severe stutter, and unfortunately was killed in a car accident in 1989. So it just talks about our life together and how I handled or didn't handle his death very well, and how I got to who I am today. So it's a tribute to him. It's our life story. It's the greatest accomplishment of my life. So go to mattcubbler.com. You can learn all about me and the book. All right, without further ado, Jen Groover, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm happy to be doing this with you today.
We've talked about it for a while. We just haven't, 2020 is kind of like the big giant kick in the proverbial dick if you're a guy. It just was the year of just whatever, dude. You just couldn't figure up, down, left, right. Everything's inverse. It was just the weirdest year, and I'm glad we finally, in early 2021, got to get this done.
Yeah, likewise.
So, you're a local, you're in the Philly area, and we met. A few years ago. When I was starting my speaking business and was going
Mhm.
to different events, and we were at I forget what it was for, but it was an event in Philly, and that's where we met. And
Mhm.
I've always been very impressed. First of all, I'm impressed with entrepreneurial people,
Right.
but I'm also impressed with women who have, um, I guess, the GFY mentality. Right? It's like you're just going to seize the moment. You're not going to let anybody stop you. And I think that's what I find the most attractive and inspiring about you is your personality and your tenacity and your grit and your work ethic. Is
Thank
that
you.
something that you've always had, or is that something you had to grow into?
So I think I inherited it from both of my parents. My mom was like the sassiest, mouthiest Brooklyn, New York woman who took nothing from anyone except for my dad, which is another story in and of itself. But um, she was just full of grit. She ran campaigns for politicians. I was door to door campaigning with her since I was 3 years of age. My first job was putting stamps on envelopes in campaign headquarters. And I went to all these different rallies with her. And, this was a woman in the 70s, which was unusual. And all the men were afraid of her. um, Vince Lombardi was like an uncle to her. So I think she got a lot of impression from him. Her father was also a pharmacist, and at that time, pharmacists were like the celebrities of the neighborhood. And my grandma Millie, she was this,
I'm a Millie. My grandmom's a Millie.
really? Oh, that's so funny. It was like the typical Italian grandma name. So she was the grandma with the wooden spoon and the rolling pins. So that part I got from my mom, and then also my dad, who was super tough. Grew up in Chester, drill sergeant in the Marines. As you can imagine, I grew up in a pretty strict household where disrespect was not tolerated at all. But my dad was really strict about sleeping in and wasting time and watching nonsense on television and not being productive. So he'd always ingrain that in me of like, he would come home. It would be summertime. I'm a teenager. He'd come home and he'd go into work at like 6, and he would come home around like 9 or 10 for something. And I'd still be in bed, and he'd freak out. He'd be like, get up, get out of bed. People have done half a day's worth of work already, and literally like flipping out. I'd be like, Dad, I'm a teenager. Like, what am I supposed to be doing right now?
Yeah.
All teenagers sleep in. So I think I got it from both sides in different ways. But I just always have had this belief that no one can tell me what I can't do. And when people do tell me what I can't do, then I want to do it more. So as you can imagine, I definitely got in trouble as a child because of this mindset. But my dad and my mom, but my dad more so, also appreciated it because he could see like no one's going to tell her to that she can't do something in life. In a big scheme of things outside of your household, that's kind of a big deal. I was never disrespectful though, and I always understood choosing between right and wrong, but nonetheless some boundaries and rules and limited beliefs projected on us by others, I would always challenge and still do today.
I love that. I mean, I'm kind of I'm a counterculture against the grain,
Hmm.
find the hardest path because I want to prove it can be done. Like I don't follow, I will not take the route that is less traveled, um, or that is the most traveled. I always take the road that is less traveled. And so I truly appreciate that mindset. I think that's why we connect. That's why we're
Hmm.
friends. But I'm not sure how many episodes you've seen. I know you're a busy woman. You do a lot of media. You're all over the place. But the show's pretty simple. I don't have a plan. I ask one question, and that question kind of fuels the conversation.
And then we
And it's
go
a
from
broad,
there.
broad question because and I ask the question this way because I can do as much research on you as I want, and I can formulate an opinion based on whatever someone else tells me about you. But who you think you are is really important to the context of a relationship and a conversation. And understanding who you are helps me an interviewer to understand how to get the most out of you in a conversation on a podcast. So the question I ask everybody, and I just replace the name, is who is Jen Groover?
So I am somebody who is very conscious minded, constantly seeking growth, seeking to understand others, um, tenacious, determined, and fair. I believe, I try to believe in the best in humankind. And I always seek to understand others' perspectives. I teaching human behavior, I know that my perspective is only my perspective. It's never the truth. And I try to stay open-minded to other people's perspectives to see what I can learn from. But my childhood started as I just talked about my mom and dad, but the part that was left out is it was a very volatile marriage. So you have two very alpha, two very headstrong people. And my dad was a highly functioning alcoholic, with a lot of anger from his childhood and trauma from his childhood. So when he would drink, at first he was the fun guy, and then he became the abusive guy. So a lot of my childhood was witnessing trauma and living through trauma and fear, physical, mental, and emotional. We'd sleep in my back of my station wagon sometimes. We'd be sleeping at neighbors' houses sometimes. So um, I think I developed this survival mechanism at a very young age to escape my reality. I would play outside constantly. I always made friends, so I'm incredibly social. Um, I would always say when I was younger, like social 101, I got like A plus plus it. The other classes, maybe not. But luckily, I learned as I got older, your network is your net worth. So that skill set was actually really great. And I also escaped through imagination, which I also think was a critical skill set that was developed that I use every day as well. As a serial entrepreneur, I'm always creating things and I'm seeing opportunity where others don't see it. And I think it's much because of that creativity, that ability to just go into another space and time in my imagination and create from there. So, but when I went to college, I studied psychology, and it was the first time I ever really liked school. Other than the social element of school and the sports element of school, but I really felt connected to the curriculum, and I was just blown away. Like, wow, every single person in the world should have to take this. We should have been learning this in grade school because it helped me make sense of why my parents did what they were doing and how they made the choices that they made. And, for my dad was just repeating cycles that he didn't know how to break. And my mom was reacting to those cycles. And so, um, I became fascinated by human behavior. and started my first business in college, not knowing I was starting my first business. I had been an athlete my whole life, track, soccer, basketball, like everything outside in the playground with the boys. I just was such a tomboy. But when I went home during a holiday, I did a step aerobics class. So I'm totally aging myself right now, but I loved it. I love that the time went so fast because you're paying attention to choreography. So your mind is nowhere but in the present moment, and the music's blaring, and I just loved it. I was like, that was the fastest hour of my life. This is amazing. Because normally as an athlete, during when you're conditioning, you're doing like wind sprints and horrible things that make you feel like you're gonna like vomit. So,
Right.
so this was like fantastic. So I went back to my university, to the administrators, and I said, can I start a group fitness program? Obviously I had to get certified, but I need steps, boombox, again, aging myself, steps,
Cassette tape,
yeah,
boombox.
that tape. I forgot to ask for a microphone, which is why to this day I have a raspy voice. But I would charge people $3 a class, and it was just so much fun. And so after college, I knew I did not want to work conventionally. I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but my dad impressioned one thing on me that really stuck, because he had his own law firm. And people will always say, why don't you go work for these like bigger law firms? Because he was also in the DA's office, and he was a divorce administrator of the county. So he had all these credentials, but he wanted autonomy, and he was so fiercely independent, which I think is where I got my fierce independence. And he would say, I don't want to answer to anybody. I want to come and go as I please. I don't want to work on Fridays if I don't want to work on Fridays. And I was like, great, that's great. Come and go as you please, not answer to anyone, not work on Fridays if you don't want to work on Fridays. So I had this mindset of controlling my own destiny, and this belief like, why would I go work for someone else and make somebody else really successful? So my dad did have this belief that when you get a degree in something, though, you do that thing for the rest of your life, which I never had a plan to do in a traditional sense. So my degree was in psychology and education, so he thought I was supposed to be a school teacher. God bless the people that have the patience for it, but I did it for half a school year, and I assure you it is not me. God gave me twins later on in life to work on that skill set of patience. But I, when I was trying that teaching stint, I was still teaching aerobics at all these studios and getting more credentials and more certifications, and became a master trainer. And then I just became a national level fitness competitor. I wound up running this guy that went to a high school near me, and he was like, Groover, I heard that you're really into this like fitness stuff, and we just opened a gym in Wilmington, Delaware, and we're looking for a female business partner to attract female clients and have an aerobic studio. What would you think? And I was like, yes. I have no idea how to do that, like run that business, but I know that I am passionate about fitness, and I know how to run a group fitness program. So the Groove Shop was born at that point. And the biggest
Here's the
thing,
name. That's what I was saying. You got the coolest last name. It literally, there's like 5 verticals you could have gone in, and you would have been a superstar no matter what.
well, it's crazy. I always kind of downplayed my name. And, I have a new show coming out called Get Your Groove Back, where I'm finally embracing it. But no one even knows my name's Jen half the time. Everyone just calls me Groover.
Right.
And I was graduating college, and one of my good friends, this guy I'd known for 4 years, finally says after graduation, there was a party that night. He goes, Groover, what is your name? I have no idea what your name is. So when I was getting married, my now ex-husband, but my business partner at the time, he goes, are you going to change your last name? And I was like, I can't. Like, I'm Groover. Like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, I'm like, no one even knows my name's Jen half the time. So my ex-husband's last name was Marley. So he was like, just get rid of Jen and be Groover Marley. And I was like, oh my God, it sounds like a stoner.
Or a porn star. Like, there's so many different ways I could go out.
I go, it sounds like a stage name. That totally sounds like a stage name. And so anyway, I didn't, because I kept thinking how funny it would be if I kept introducing myself to people that way. But I now look back and I'm like, nah, I maybe should have done that. But
I think Groover's done you well.
Yeah. So anyway, when I started that fitness business and I was fortunately exposed to all of our clients were extremely successful, like the founder of MBNA, for example. And then we also had many DuPont heirs who were already programmed for success and wealth. So I learned so much from my clients at that time. And I also at all these fitness conventions were exposed to people that were high level thought leaders around mindset training. And I was a sponge, and I would hire them all and I'd sit at their feet and I'd be like, teach me everything. And that was really one of the most critical decisions I made in my life, was to be a student to all of these people that had such a wealth of knowledge and different consciousness. I mean, Bob Proctor was one of my personal mentors when I was in my 20s. And this is back in 2000 was when I first met, the end of 1999. So, but 2000 is when I started doing this training with him. And so here we are, like 21 years later. I was learning universal laws back then. I was learning about the law of attraction. I was learning about, how your thoughts create your reality. So quantum physics, and how to visualize that, how to reprogram your brain, how to create new neural pathways in your brain. So back then, if I even talked about this to people, they'd be like, what is happening? But now it's common knowledge. But all of those things I learned back then, I applied to my life. And so everything that I've accomplished has all been intentional and has all been created from the formulas in which I learned in my 20s.
I think, first of all, I'm impressed as fuck, but that people don't understand the reality of appreciating and acknowledging and absorbing the good, the bad, and the ugly throughout. Like that acknowledgement of how you got to where you are. And I always tell people, and since you're an author, you understand, but having written a biography, a memoir,
mm-hmm.
an autobiography, in some case, part of the book, but when you can go back and relive your life, you truly, and then put it in paper, you really get a chance to see how you got here, like how the path got there, and where your mistakes were, and your choices, and how they have consequences, and sometimes they have reward, and putting that all together. I think you were an early adopter, and your awareness level, and you mentioned that you're an aware person, is, I would argue, it's probably 80 to 90% of success is awareness.
Yeah.
Because you can absorb and then use that awareness for many different things. Like once you know the information, how you use the information is up to you, whether you use it to construct your life or build it. When you made a decision to become an entrepreneur, did you have, like, I'm a wing it guy. Like my entire life is one giant wing it. I have a vision,
mm-hmm.
but no structure to that vision. And I can't work in a box. I just never have. I have schedules, but I don't have a structure. Did you have people have vision boards and all that kind of stuff? I'm not that guy, but I know people that do, and it works very well. Did you have a plan to get to where you are today? Or was it simply, I'm going to absorb and then sort of figure it out as I'm going?
A little bit of both, quite honestly. I am very much into understanding the balance between pushing forward and letting go. I think it's one of the hardest balances to figure out in life, and one of the most important ones. You said awareness is so important, and I want to echo that, because awareness allows you to evaluate constantly. And as an entrepreneur, you have to look at yourself in the mirror every single day and call yourself out on your limited beliefs, on your repeated behaviors that are causing limitations in your success, and constantly be tweaking who you are to get better, or course correcting the directions you're going in if they're not working for you. So I always have vision. I had a vision. I would be an author, an international speaker, that I would, do television. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but every time I would accomplish something, I'd be like, okay, next, and it was just this sense of, not that I wasn't grateful for all the things, but I'm actually at a point right now where I'm like, what is that next big thing for me because I've done so many of these things. And so I intentionally visualized all of these things, and they all have come to fruition. Um, Incrementally, I have a plan for each one. Like when I started the Butler Bag Company, I knew that I wanted to make it $1 million in the first year of business. I wasn't exactly sure how that was going to happen, but I knew licensing was going to be part of the business model. And so, um, you know, I don't get hung up on business plans ever. I think they're kind of a waste of time because you make a plan and then usually life doesn't work out in that way. I have a framework of what I think the priorities are and how it needs to happen. But I'm a little bit of both where I plan, for 1,000,000% visualize. I'd say visualization is a huge part of my strategy. And then with visualization, if you don't have belief that you're worthy and capable of having that, you're not having it. So another part of that is really evaluating my beliefs around what I'm trying to attract in my life, and then mastering that sense of self-sabotage if it's there. Like if I had limited beliefs around money, I couldn't have created $1 million company in 1 year. And then the other big thing that I know sounds soft to people, but I think is one of the most important things is your frequency is your priority.
Yeah.
So having my energy up on a regular basis, having my energy at a high level makes me a magnet. Again, it goes back to quantum physics. This isn't like woo-woo theory. So when my energy is up, my frequency is up, I am a magnet for greater opportunities, higher level people. People would always be like, how do you attract these people in your life? And I'd be like, well, because I wake up every day to be a magnet to attract those people. That's my intention. Before I even get out of bed in the morning, I blast some of my favorite music that gets my energy up and gets me like it's like my tuning fork, right? So I get up and I have this energy and this frequency. So everything else is easier that day. But if I woke up and I was like, oh, life is so hard and here I go again, I'm going to then attract low frequency people and things.
I love, I've been deep diving hard. I'm doing actually a podcast on Tuesday with two guys that are super into being the Great Awakening and 5D consciousness and energy and frequency and 420 and the whole like everything. Yeah.
My language.
So and I really, I've always believed in the, I've never, first of all, I'm a high school graduate, so I don't have all the degrees and all that kind of stuff. My life and the things I absorb are through experiences and people I've interacted with, and everything I do has to have some sort of I have to deconstruct and then reconstruct logically. Yeah. But when they brought up when I heard this 5D stuff and 4D and 5D and all this,
I love it. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about right now.
I love it. And I'm fascinated by it because it's simply logical. Like it makes sense to me. Science, I get on some level. There's some massaging of things to make science fit, but this is one of those things where, just on a very linear, simplistic level, if you wake up feeling good, if you wake up exposing yourself to happiness and joy and love, that it is inevitable that that's what you attract.
Correct.
I've never, and I am the ultimate self guinea pig. Like I do shit to myself just to see what the result is.
Right.
So that I can say, this is what happens. Some of the things aren't good, and I'm okay with that, but I have to learn. That's how I learn.
You learn, right. You learn from the mistakes.
Understanding that is huge. Understanding the way the frequency component works and the way the universe attracts through energy, and how you see the examples where people will put I don't know, like balls or beads or whatever on the table, and they use vibration at a certain frequency, and they can create a star out of those things that they put on the table, or circle or square, and based on the different frequency, and understanding what frequency creates that. And I'm like, well, that, first of all, mind blown, but that stuff is just the base knowledge of what frequency can create and how we're all energy and matter and based on all of that. So for me, it's fascinating, and I can't wait to be on this podcast on Tuesday.
And I want to jump in there for a second, because we can create what we want, but more so what people do is create what they don't want, because they focus on what they don't want. They worry about what they want. They worry about their fear, and they actually create the reality of those fears And then they affirm it. The ego affirms it because they're like, oh yeah, well, I knew that was going to happen. Well, no, you created it to happen. You made it happen.
It's there's so many things in my life that I can retrace and understand how I, on a negative level, how I got myself to where I was at, and
Yeah.
how I manifested that through my thoughts, through my beliefs, and that over a period of time. Because we don't get to determine how quickly things evolve, right? We
Hmm.
can just work ourselves, work the energy, work our mindset to the
Hmm.
point where we achieve. We just don't have really. I can't say I'm going to do this in 6 months or a year, because there's so many other variables in play and certain things you're trying to accomplish. But I'm utterly fascinated by um, the manifestation through energy and vibration, and how you attract people who are, um, whether they know it or not at the time, in your journey based
Yeah.
on your vibration and your energy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So when you, there's so many things to unpack with you,
I
and
actually use that as a strategy to attract the people that I need along the way too. So if I like the screen that I have behind me is a company I created during COVID because I kept going on to these different Zooms, and so many people weren't prepared. Their kids are like fighting in the background, their kitchen's like all over the place. And I was like, well, wouldn't it be great just to have a screen to like protect everybody? And I didn't want to. The one part of product development businesses I don't like, and I know that I don't like it because I've done it, is dealing with the factories. And I was like, I need to attract a partner who already has this infrastructure in place. I have the relationships in the marketing, and they have the fulfillment center and the factories. And boom, I did. But I don't like in my mind, as soon as I make this decision, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to attract that person. Now, it's not like I sit on my couch and I don't do things like research who it could be or think about who it could be. But when I put that in my mind, it came to me like, oh, wait, you know the person. You went to college with the person. It's Fred. Call Fred. So I call Fred. I pitch Fred the idea, and then boom, we have a company. So I do it in so many aspects of my life where I'm like, I need this person. I'm going to attract this person.
it's, and I wish I was as organized as you, number one. But I also know you know, my background also is in human behavior, which is why I think we also connect. But I work on a lot of personality profiling and understanding your what is typically who you are, and then the things that when you're adapting, how you can adapt into a certain personality for short periods of time and be successful, but not necessarily the long term. And I
Yeah.
know what my adaptable personality profile looks like, and it's not. It is I can adapt into this organized person for short periods of time, but it's not a long term solution for me. But I do understand how the vision component. I've always envisioned myself in a certain light, doing certain things in a certain way, and it's never once not been that, because I always saw myself doing something that's never been done before.
Yeah.
So I am I'm driven to succeed, and I absorb, I ask for doubt.
Yeah.
Like I want that. I want to be the undrafted rookie free agent. I want to be Vince Papale, right? Like I want to be like, and we're both friends with Vince, and
Yeah.
like I want to be that guy that went from 30-year-old teacher in Delaware County to playing for the Eagles, and now has a movie about him. Like I want that, because that to me is like the biggest GFY I can think of. Because I grew up poor. I grew up in low income housing. I grew up in a single mom working 3 jobs, and um, with this learning disabled brother. Like I understand struggle,
Yeah.
and I think part of me embraces the struggle,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I want to have that challenge.
Yeah. So there's a fine balance between wanting to bring more struggle into your life than
Right.
than what you need, but on the other side, when it does happen, recognizing that it's shaping you into a stronger, more resilient, more higher level sense of self. Anytime I go through pain, um, like 2019 was just a horrible year. And there were so many things that were out of my control that had happened. Um, one of them, my father passing away, and it wasn't just him passing away. I seriously believe that there was foul play in him passing away by family members. And then another one was my one daughter was really ill, bedridden, very ill. We couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Those are just two of the many things. And it was one of those time periods in life where I feel like we've all been through, where every time you turn around, you're like, now what? Seriously, like, stop. I can only handle so much at that one time. And I feel that when I am in those moments, I stop and I'm like, okay, this is growth time. This time is preparing you for something bigger, for something better, for something more, but you need to become more through this. So you have a choice to become a victim in it, or you have a choice to say, I'm going to grow through this. I'm going to use this time as purposefully as possible. So when I get on the other side of these things, then I'm a way more up-level version of myself. And that's always my goal every day, is just to be better tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And the craziest thing, by the way, of, talk about miracles and weird things in the universe, how they happen. My daughter, Morgan, who was the one that was very ill, we had struggled with chronic Lyme issues for 10 years, and it attacked her central nervous system. And the reason it was so bad, it like went in cycles, kind of like remission with cancer. It went in cycles over the years. And in 2019, she was fully like bedridden, couldn't go to school, nothing, which was hard having a twin sister and watching your twin live your life without you. But she had complete autonomic dysfunction, where her blood sugar, her blood pressure, her heart rate, nothing could regulate on its own, which was really quite frightening as a parent, and hard to have hope, because no one could help us figure out like how to get past where we were. And then the thought of what if she was going to live like that for the rest of her life, and what would the quality of her life be? And without getting morbid, there was a lot of kids her age and one of her best friends in their school who committed suicide. So there was like so many like things happening in this dynamic. But the craziest thing is, and the good part of this story is, I went to Asia February last year to the beginning of March, right during the height of COVID in Asia, and was doing a book tour. And so many people told me not to go. So many people were like, you shouldn't go, you shouldn't do that. And I just felt like I needed to go. And I had the best time, but I didn't realize why I needed to go. So when I came back, I called my doctor and I said, hey, what do I do for Morgan? Like, what should I do? Should I like quarantine for 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I don't know. And he had been a doctor that was very active in a lot of the research during SARS and MERS. And this was before any of what I'm about to say became political. This was March 7th. So he said, Jen, just put her on, we're just going to put her on hydroxychloroquine. She'll be fine. And I'm like, wait, what is that? There's like a thing for this? And he was like, yeah, we used it during SARS and MERS. It's a cousin. It's the same thing. So I researched it, because we're not like a big like medicine family here. We're way more holistic and preventative. So I research it. Safe enough for children, safe enough for nursing women and pregnant women. You can't even take cough syrup when you're pregnant. So I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then I researched even more that the root of it comes from quinine.
Yep.
And then if you research what quinine does, you're like, wow, oh my God. And we can't get that in the United States. That's so crazy. Not crazy, crazy. Anyway, Morgan starts taking this and I see improvements. The first thing I see is that she had all these like warts on her fingers that would come during these flare-ups. And they wouldn't go away, like using that compound W stuff, they started going away. And I was like, that's weird. So I saw her energy increasing a little bit too, pretty quickly. So I called my doctor and I'm like, is there any way that this could actually cure Lyme? And he was like, well, I never thought about it, but yeah. I mean, Lyme is like this parasitic thing, but what causes the chronic Lyme are all these viruses from the parasites. So I was like, keep her on it. We need to keep her on it. She's now 90% herself. She is literally living her life, going to the gym every day. The only thing that's left right now is psychological, where it's like post-traumatic stress. there's this part of her that's still afraid she's going to get sick again. Or what if she goes somewhere and doesn't feel well and can't escape leaving there? So that psychological part can actually put her physiological state backwards a little bit. But we're working through that. But it was literally the greatest gift in the world. And talk about the positives when people were upset during 2020. Obviously there's some serious reasons for people to be upset, but when people were complaining about the little things, I was like, this is nothing. Like,
You
this
should
is
have saw my 2019.
yeah, this is nothing. And it was all perspective, right? But I found that the growth that came from 2019 through 2020, I feel like 2021, like I'm like 10 feet taller.
First of all, God bless your daughter and your doctor for having the forethought and the foresight to use something like that, pre-politics of it. My father-in-law suffered from massive Lyme. We thought he was losing his mind, but he actually had severe Lymes in his brain. It was basically like rabies in an animal. But
Yeah, it's horrific. I mean, I literally, anyone who tells me that they get it, my heart breaks. But now I feel excited that I get to tell people about that hydroxychloroquine could help cure them too.
right, and it's amazing how sometimes limited, intentionally limited, things become in our world
Yeah.
in order to promote an agenda or an alternative belief system, and we'll leave that at that. But let me ask you this, and I don't know the answer to this, but when I'm at peace, like when the world is all quiet and I have all my things accomplished and everybody's happy in my world, I find myself going a little bit nutty. But when there's when it's like this constantly in my life, right? Everything's zipping by and everything slows down then, and I
Yeah.
see everything. Do you survive? Like, does your brain function? Because I think it's important for people to hear a very successful entrepreneur, female, especially because people will associate chaos and critical thinking and triaging and war and with men, but women have the same capability mentally, especially to solve complex problems during chaotic times. Do you find yourself being your most efficient and effective during the times of creative thought and quiet, or during when everything's going on all at once and there's chaos all around you?
Chaos for sure. But I think we were conditioned in that environment as children based on our childhood that it feels normal to us. So when 2019 was happening, so many of my friends were like, how are you not having a nervous breakdown right now? And I'm like, it's kind of probably because I was conditioned in this as a child that what feels or what seems like a tremendous amount of craziness to somebody, and it was a tremendous amount of craziness, I can adapt to. My muscles of resiliency were so trained that I feel like I was the kid that was doing the paper the night before because I thrived in that pressure, and I never did it the week before. And anytime I even tried to, I just couldn't do it. And so, fortunately, I thrive during crazy times. And the more I have on my plate, the more productive I am for sure. That was the hard part of 2020 for me. I kind of lost a sense of momentum, a sense of drive, because I came home from Asia and I went to a wedding in Mexico a few days later and came home and everything was shut down. And I had over 125 speaking engagements and appearances canceled that were predicted for the rest of the year. And that was really hard. Like that was speaking as my life, getting on stage and connecting with people. And at first I was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna stay calm, gonna stay positive, you're gonna find the good in all this. But I definitely found in January this year, looking back, that slowing down for such a long period of time, I intentionally enjoyed many parts of it, but I definitely lost a sense of myself for a while. And I lost like a sense of mojo, and this energy of momentum and movement that I never want to feel again. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was like, okay, it's the summertime. I'll enjoy the summer. I'll enjoy the holidays, but I never want to feel that way again.
Yeah, 2020 was I don't know if it had, I don't know if 2020 affected me as badly as it affected other people in a tangible way. Like
Hmm.
I I was me. I had to go to work every day as a cop. Like I didn't have there wasn't a an all stop to my life. My life just kept going, and I just had to adapt to the new environment around me. But my world didn't really change at all. What I found 2020 was hard for me was it exposed a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes that's the for me, the it created animosity, it created tension, it created conflict, it created separation and division. And and as a logical thinker and somebody who is always problem solving and always trying to, as I always say, and in my job is to unfuck shit in 5 minutes as a cop. Like I don't
Yeah.
get all day to be with you to figure out your life problems. Get in there, I get the 35,000 foot view. I try to figure out what's going on with moving parts, and then I have to unfuck it. And that's what you expect from me.
Right.
And that's kind of my world that I live in on a daily basis, even in my business stuff. And um, I couldn't unfuck 2020,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that's what going to where my day-to-day function of life was normal because as a cop there was no change. But the ethereal shit,
Yeah.
I couldn't. I knew what I was seeing. I knew what I was feeling. I understood what was happening in my own logical way of doing it. But it's like I couldn't get anyone else to join me in seeing things. And I think that's where I became. 2020 was the hardest for me in my life,
Yeah.
in that everybody came out with what they thought and felt, and it was so polarly opposite.
Yes.
It
Yes.
created that feeling of I can't unfuck this.
Well, I think that's where the clarity of the 3D and the 5D, I mean, until you probably had that vocabulary and understanding, it was really polarizing. We're now understanding 3D, 4D, 5D. You can actually understand. I know people are just stuck in this five senses world at 3D with ego running the show. And then some people are ascending already into 4D, which would be your tribe. And then us 4D are moving into 5D. And um, some of the people that we knew and loved and cared about won't leave 3D,
Right.
and they're going to live a very different life. And if we try to pull them along, we're just going to create our own pain. But um, it was you and I were feeling the same
Yeah.
thing during that time period. I know we had many conversations. When I could put that terminology and understanding into place, I was bothered less by the opposites of my views. I was bothered less by the fact that the people that saw things so differently than me couldn't see it. Like they just couldn't see it any different. And that's because they're living in a different consciousness. And so it gave me an opportunity to feel less frustrated by it and give a lot more grace. I actually feel bad for anyone that I know that's going to stay stuck in that 3D space. Like I really do. I can't even imagine. And I don't mean that like in a mean way of judgment. I just it's more of an observation of that stinks to stay there because it's like to me that's like living in purgatory.
Right.
Literally, that would be my purgatory.
People are, and I try to help at least explain myself. Like I'm not. I've learned I'm not convincing anybody. I'm not trying to convince anybody. What I'm trying to do is create pathways, and that I got cancel cultured because I created a pathway. I lost an audience of about 10,000 people who were on a journey with me who weren't where I was when we started, and just trying to help them create this question and answer component in their brain and not simply absorbing and taking as fact anything that is presented to them. And that was something I really enjoyed, and it helped me as a therapeutic to sort of understand that a um, I can still serve, and I
Yeah.
think that's a big part of my life is serving, and how can I
Hmm.
help you,
Yeah.
and not judge you. I don't judge anybody who is not where I am, and I really don't. But if people want to judge me, all I
Yeah.
ask is just hear me and
Yeah.
understand where I am. And if you're
Mhm.
not there, I'm okay with that. but this
Yeah.
is where I'm going. And I'm not coming backwards ever again. Like
Yeah.
I'm here and moving forward. Do you find yourself, especially, and I don't have the level of responsibility and of branding on the branding level that you do. I'm just Matt Cubbler, whose new brand is go fuck yourself global. So I'm coming from maybe a little bit of a different vantage point, but how do you manage with everything you got going on? You got so many different things that you have your hands in. How do you balance that transition in consciousness and understanding and awareness, and then still maintain the business side of everything?
So I feel like I was always kind of in this space ahead of the curve.
Yep.
I mean, starting 20 years ago, um, like the training that I had and the intuition and knowingness that I had at a very young age, I think partly came from surviving such trauma in my childhood. Um, and I was always beating to my own drum, and I was always seeing things that now 20 years later are common conversation. I embraced it 20 years ago. So I've grown to be very comfortable in understanding that the balance that I need between understanding what I know and speaking it in a mainstream way that I can get people hooked in so that they can elevate. And that's really what my goal is, right? To teach people, I can't teach people where I'm at. I have to teach people where they're at. And the majority, it's easy for me to pick up quickly who in my audiences are at where I'm at or like close to it. But then the majority of the people I need to touch are the mainstream people. That's mainstream, right? So one of my purest desires is to find those 3D people who don't want to stay there, but don't know how to get out of there. And when I speak about some of these like quantum theories in a mainstream way that makes it sound like I'm talking about fashion, I can actually get people to get hooked into seeing and understanding, elevating their potential and elevating their thought processes and understanding their ability to control their mindset and take responsibility for that. And I think that's actually part of the challenge for me that I enjoy is how do I reach people that don't know that they're reachable yet?
That's such an amazing talent to have. And I like to think I have it not nearly as eloquently as you just stated, but I think the process and the desire and the understanding of what the objective
Mhm.
is there. And I pray that everyone that is listening to this, if you're not in that transitioning out of 3D mindset, and which is just basically allowing your environment to control your outcomes, is really what 3D is that you're not in control of any of it. You're just sort of participating in life as a spectator rather than someone in control. If you're not working towards exiting that and moving into a more thought-driven, mindset-driven, control-driven, love-driven uh,
High
purpose,
frequency.
right?
Yes.
I hope they find somebody like a Jen Groover. And I know your time is valuable here, and I don't want to go over our allotted time, but I know that when people hear this, they're going to be like, I gotta get a hold of Jen. I gotta figure out how can I use Jen in my life? So I know you have several books out. If you want to go over what those are, and then also where people can find you,
Sure. So I'm super
media or
active.
whatever.
Well, I'm super active on social media. So it's one N in Jen Groover, Scroovy with an R. But my latest book is The M.O.R.E Method. And this is literally to me something I take incredible pride in because it is it's a book that brought together my 20 plus years of teaching human behavior and simplified framework of bringing multiple disciplines together like quantum physics, neuroscience, psychology, physiology, um, nutrition, Buddhism, all rolled into one that could take anyone at any stage from where they are to where they want to go. And so I feel like this is definitely something to help unlock that awareness for people to start to elevate. I also post a lot of videos. I do some training still. I do this accelerated achievement program for people who want to get unstuck, to accelerate in 30 days quickly. And I also do a bunch of mastermind groups that are really fun. One that I love that I'm just launching, the next one, is called Mindset and Manifestation Mastery. So we're bringing in together all the sciences and helping people understand quantum physics and neuroscience and how to use it to their advantage to truly intentionally create their reality.
And your website is jengruber.com, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And all the
Absolutely.
books, all your appearances, anybody wants to book you for speaking or to get
Yep.
involved in one of your masterminds, that's all on that website.
Absolutely. Or they can email me at Jen@JenGruber.
Awesome. Everybody, hang tight, Jen. We'll talk off air real quick, but I just want to close out the show. First of all, thank you, Jen, for coming on the show. I could do this literally. People don't understand how I geek out about the mind and
Yes.
behaviors, and I could do this all fucking day. I really could.
Likewise.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate the fact that you are who you are, doing the things that you do for people, and you do it humbly, but with extreme confidence and a whole lot of swagger. And I dig
Thank
that.
you. I appreciate that.
But everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the 2 Dates in the Dash podcast. It's been fascinating. I plan on really ramping up my podcasting. 2020 kind of kicked me down a little bit, only because I was doing so much social media lives and talking, and I felt like I was over putting myself out there too much, that a podcast would just simply be white noise. But now that I'm not doing those as much because of cancel culture, I'm doing more podcasting again. So I plan on banging these out as often as possible. But thank you all for listening. Thank you to Jen. And don't forget mattkubbler.com. And if you're going to subscribe to the podcast, please click that automatic download button. All right, everybody. God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.